Hello everyone and welcome back to Fliks Picks, your streamlined Overwatch League analysis and predictions channel. Just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. I unfortunately this week don't have the kill and death averages for you today. The site where I collect this information from did not have the current KDAs available after last week's game, so I cannot provide them to you in this video. Fingers crossed we will have them in the next video though. It also means that I'll have some pretty ugly last 9 games slides for you, but the information is still there. I'll also be putting up 2 videos this week as opposed to 4, so day 1 and 2 will be covered in this video, and day 3 and 4 will be covered in the next video. Now, week 3 was one hell of a week. I managed to pick 9 of the 12 games, so that's a pretty good result. But the caliber of gameplay was just excellent last week. The battle for LA was incredibly intense. Even Golden Boy passed out. Florida really upped their game, taking Seoul to a map 5. And the Valiant managed to take down the New York Excelsior. It was a fantastic week. If you did miss the games, I would recommend you watch Mayhem versus Dynasty match, the Excelsior versus the Valiant, the Fuel versus the Spitfire, and the Dragons versus the Dynasty. I'm recommending those last 2 games because Dallas had the cleanest runs in the first 2 maps against London, and conversely, the first 2 maps in the other game should have gone to the Dragons, but they absolutely blew it, and watching the pros doing what you shouldn't do might help you in your games. Looking at the Stage 4 standings, we can see the LA Valiant taking top spot, with the XL and Gladiators in 2nd and 3rd place with the same wins and losses. Then we have the Shock, Outlaws, and Dallas all vying for that 4th spot with a 4-2 record this stage. Philly and London are even on a 3-3, with Seoul just behind them on a 2-4. Then the last 3 teams who are yet to win a series, Boston, Florida, and Shanghai. We've had a bit of movement in the overall standings from the results of this week. New York is still on top, of course, but now the Valiant holds 2nd place, followed by London and Boston. Seoul, Gladiators, and Philly are all sitting on a 21-15, hoping to secure a spot in the finals, but they are followed closely by Houston with a 20-16 record. The bottom third of the leaderboard shows the Shock on a 16-20 record, Dallas on a 10-26 record, Mayhem on a 6-30 record, and the Dragons on a record-breaking 0-36. Anyway, there's a lot to look forward to this week, so let's kick it off. Stage 4, Week 4, Day 1. The first game of the day and week has the Seoul Dynasty against the Boston Uprising. These two will be fighting it out on Blizzard World, Horizon Lunar Colony, Lijiang Tower, and Dorado. It's a pretty even contest in this series. We can see Seoul running 3 wins, 1 tie, and 4 losses on Blizzard World, while Boston run 3 wins, 1 tie, and 1 loss. Horizon Lunar Colony sees Seoul on a 6-4 record, with Boston on a 4-2-2 record. Lijiang Tower has both teams winning 6 times, but Seoul has lost 5 times to Boston's 7. Finally, Dorado, where it's a 4-3 record to Seoul and a 4-5 record to Boston. If we see these two fighting it out on Nepal, both teams have lost the map 7 times, but Seoul has won it 6 times to Boston's 4 times. When these teams have met before, each team shares 1 victory over the other. And as for the last 9 games, Seoul have won 3 games to Boston's 2 games. Both of these teams have been struggling this stage. Boston are yet to win a series, and Seoul are sitting on a 2-4. Seoul had relatively easy competition last week against the Dragons and Mayhem, which should have been quite easy for a team of this caliber, but they had a really hard time getting the job done. Now, while the game against the Dragons was a 4-0, it should have gone to a Game 5 had the Dragons not been so reckless with their plays. The Mayhem managed to take Seoul to a Game 5, and for a while it looked like the Mayhem should have actually beaten them in their matchup, so I'm not convinced that Seoul is really up to the task given their performance last week. Boston, on the other hand, finally making a comeback a little bit last week. They managed to tie and take a map off of London, and they took a map from the Shock as well. They might have lost both games, but last week was their best performance this stage so far, and it can only get better from there. They looked a lot more confident using more on-meta characters, and seemed to know how to run some counter comps, which they've been lacking all stage. I thought they played especially well against the Shock, regardless of the fact the score read 3-1. It was a very tight series. And that's why I'm pretty confident the Uprising will take the win here. I'm backing them 70-30 compared to the community, who narrowly backs them 56-44. Now, it will be a tight series, but I think Boston are in a better state than Seoul right now, and it will show in their gameplay. Game 2 will see the Shanghai Dragons against the Florida Mayhem, the bottom two teams of the league. They will be fighting it out on Blizzard World, Horizon Lunar Colony, Lijiang Tower, and Watchpoint Gibraltar. The map stats are pretty rough for both of these teams. Neither team is positive on any of the maps. Blizzard World has a 2-5 record to the Dragons and a 1-7 record to the Mayhem. Both teams have won Horizon Lunar Colony twice, but the Dragons have lost 6 times while the Mayhem have tied once and lost 5 times. Lijiang Tower is especially rough for the Dragons with 0 wins and 10 losses, while the Mayhem have found some success, 2 wins and 5 losses. Finally, we have Watchpoint Gibraltar, where both teams are running a 1-6 record. If we go to Nepal, it's again really tough for the Dragons with another 0-10 record compared to the Mayhem's 4-8. When these teams have fought in the past, the record shows the Mayhem walking away with the win twice. As for their last 9 games, neither team has managed to secure a win. It's been an uphill battle for these teams as they have both struggled all season long. They're more often than not regarded as the worst teams in the league, and unfortunately the standings do reflect that. But that's not to say we haven't seen improvements, and both teams have actually been impressing me quite a lot this stage. Now that being said, there are still a lot of issues, the glaring one being Shanghai's ultimate usage. Now, last week against Seoul, they had 2 maps on complete lockdown with 5 ultimates ready to go. And instead of methodically applying them to the fight to get the most out of them and control the situation, they wasted all of them for no reason, no cohesion. I mean, I'm a console mid-platinum player and I'm banging my head against the wall watching this play out. These are pro players who play the game every day and get paid for it. You'd think that with that amount of time invested into the game, some sort of instinct would kick in where you can quickly read the situation and act accordingly. But that did not happen, and they threw away 2 very winnable rounds, and it ultimately cost them the entire series. As for Florida, I mentioned last week how they have been running a variety of compositions with different team members. What they were having the most success with was the use of Sire player on a sniper role. So when I saw Logix coming out in the starting lineup, my curiosity peaked. Now it turns out Sire player has a shoulder injury and couldn't play, and thank God he didn't. Logix was straight up destroying this week. He went so big in both of their matchups, and the team seemed a lot happier with the freedom that comes with Logix's hero pool. They weren't forced to play around Widow, they could just do whatever needed to be done, and the result was a very positive week from the Mayhem. It was really refreshing to see. Now, whether Sire player or Logix is playing, I'm liking the look of this Mayhem team right now. That's why the community and myself, pretty confident in them. Myself, I'm backing them 75-25, and the community backs the Mayhem 68-32. They are simply the better team here. Dia or Addo could go really big here and clutch out a few maps, but if the Dragons keep making basic mistakes like last week, then they're really looking at a 0-40. Game 3 will be Fliks series to Overwatch, as it is the battle for Texas, Dallas versus Houston. They will be dueling on Kings Row, Hanamura, Lijiang Tower, and Dorado. Now this is another series where the maps are relatively pretty tight, bar the first map. 2-6 for Dallas on Kings Row, while Houston runs 7-3. Dead even for Dallas on Hanamura, 5-5, with Houston running 4 wins, 1 tie, and 3 losses. Lijiang Tower has both teams losing 7 times. Dallas has won 3 times there compared to Houston's 5. And then Dorado, where Dallas sports a 2-6 record to Houston's 5-4. If we go to Nepal, Dallas have a 2-7 record compared to Houston, who run a 6-3. In the past, when these teams have fought, it's been Houston out in front with a 2-1 record overall. As for their last 9 games, both teams have walked away with 4 wins and 5 losses. Both of these teams have been on a bit of a roller coaster this stage, as they both sit tied for 4th place with 4 wins and 2 losses. Houston hasn't looked as good as this since stage 1, and Dallas has just never looked this good before. Both teams are a bit unpredictable though, especially the Outlaws. I mean, when they're hot, but if they're cold, man, are they cold. They seem to be performing well enough against mid to lower tier teams, but they are struggling with the top tier teams. Dallas, on the other hand, are a bit of a mixed bag. They've had some good wins against top tier teams, but also some losses, notably to the Shock and Gladiators. Now, I wouldn't consider the current form Shock to be a lower tier team. Overall, they're playing quite well and their comms and synergy is there. I'm just worried that they're relying too much on either Mickey or Taimu to go big in order to carry their team. Their last map against London on Watchpoint Gibraltar showed Mickey not on Brigitte, and the team was struggling until he swapped onto her, then they started to pull it together. Now, if that's the case, then the Outlaws might be pretty dominant this series as their lineup includes a lot of players who can counter the Fuel's main strategies. Jake can play Junkrat and Farah really well. Linksa is a god sniper when he's on. Muma has excellent survivability and positioning. And Arhan. Look, no intention to undercut the performances by the Fuel though. Just watch their Blizzard World and Horizon Lunar Colony maps against London from last week, and you'll see just how damn tight they are right now. This is a really hard game to call. The community is calling 66-34 to the Outlaws. I'm going to really narrowly back the Outlaws 52-48. The Outlaws aren't blowing me away right now, while Dallas, they have been performing really well. But I think Houston is going to prepare and fight really hard for this win. And man, when they're switched on, I think they're the better team than Dallas. Going to be a tight series, and it could go either way. But my pick is Houston. Moving on to day 2, the first game of the day sees the Los Angeles Valiant against the London Spitfire. They will battle it out on Blizzard World, Horizon Lunar Colony, Lijiang Tower, and Dorado. The map stats show both teams losing on Blizzard World 5 times, with the Gladiators securing 2 wins and 1 tie, while the Spitfire have 3 wins. Horizon Lunar Colony shows the Valiant with a 3-win, 1 tie, 5-loss record compared to the Spitfire, who boast 7 wins, 1 tie, and 2 losses. Lijiang Tower sees the Valiant with an 8-2 record compared to the Spitfire's even 7-7. Finally, Dorado, where it's 5-3 for the Valiant and a 6-5 for the Spitfire. If these teams do go to Nepal, the Valiant hold a 9-win, 4-loss record to the Spitfire's 7-win, 5-loss record. When these teams have faced off before, it's always gone to a Game 5, but London has taken the win twice. As for their last 9, the Valiant have won 7, while London have won 6. I didn't treat the Valiant too kindly last week in my predictions, as I thought they weren't performing too well in the earlier weeks of the stage against teams that they, should have beat pretty cleanly. But after their performance last week, I believe my mind has been changed. There was a lot more consistency from the rest of the team last week. It wasn't just the Soon and Agility show. Well, it sort of was, but it looked like more of a team effort this week and less of Soon and Agility's carrying when the rest of the team messed up. Like last week, I'm still not entirely confident with London this stage. I'm not too impressed with what they're showing us. They didn't win very convincingly against Boston, and their game against the Fuel was more embarrassing than when Philly went up against the Fuel. We've seen Birdring come to life every now and then, and Gesture is trying hard to get work done, but it is really not enough. It doesn't look like they're communicating as well as they have in their past, and their carry team members just aren't carrying. I think the leaderboard says it all here, guys. Valiant undefeated and the Spitfire 3-3. The community can't seem to make up their mind and are calling a 50-50, and I think that's a very misguided assessment. The Valiant are by far the better team this stage. That's why I'm pretty certain 85-15 that they will decimate them. I mean, that Fuel game last week. I know I've mentioned it 3 times already, but come on, guys, the Valiant is winning this one. Game 2 has the LA Gladiators against the New York Excelsior. They will be facing off on Kings Row, Hanamura, Lijiang Tower, and Watchpoint Gibraltar. Nearly positive results for both teams on all the maps here, 6-1 and 8-0 respectively on Kings Row, 5-4 for the Gladiators on Hanamura, while the XL has an 8-win, 1-tie record, 9-2 on Lijiang Tower for the Gladiators and 6-5 for the XL. Finally, Watchpoint Gibraltar, where the Gladiators are running 2-4 and the XL are running 6-3. If we go to Nepal, it's still very close, 9-1 for the Gladiators and 9-3 for the XL. In the past, New York Excelsior have won against the Gladiators twice, with their last matchup going to a Game 5. As for their last 9 games, the Gladiators have won 6, while the XL have won 8. Both of these teams have been in top form this stage. I was surprised to see the Gladiators fall to the Valiant last week, but it was simply a matter of Soon going full beast mode on Widow and Surefour not being able to answer. I think their loss pooled into their Philly game where they played pretty average against an even more average Fusion. They got the win, but they really need to shake their defeat and move on because they were starting to drop the ball on day 2 and it looked a bit hairy for them for a while when they were against the Fusion. Now, New York Excelsior, they need a bit of a reality check. They're the best team in the league, hands down. But they really threw away that game against the Valiant. All props to the Valiant, but I think New York sort of helped them out a bit. They came back really strong after halftime, but on Watchpoint Gibraltar, they messed around way too much and became very complacent. They started to play like as if they had already won, and the dumb mistakes they were making just fueled the Valiant to push harder, and ultimately they lost the series. New York is capable of beating every team, and I'm still going to back them in this match, 75-25. The community is also pretty certain, backing them 77-23. But if their attitude continually grows arrogant like it did last week, then they might just throw away all of their hard work. You're not done playing until you raise the trophy above your head, lads. Our final game of the day, which will be Fliks series to Overwatch, is the San Francisco Shock against the Philadelphia Fusion. They'll be fighting it out on Kings Row, Horizon Lunar Colony, Lijiang Tower, and Watchpoint Gibraltar. As you can see, it's a pretty tight looking series. San Francisco running a 4-3 on Kings Row compared to Philly's 3-4. Both teams with 3 wins on Horizon Lunar Colony, with San Francisco running 6 losses while Philly run 5 losses. Lijiang Tower is a bit stacked. San Francisco have a 3-6 record while Philly have a 10-3 record. And finally, Watchpoint Gibraltar, with San Francisco double their wins, 6-3, compared to Philly, who have a 4-5. If we go to Nepal, we can see San Francisco running a 5-7 record, while Philly break even, 6-6. When these teams have fought before, it's even Stevens, 1 win for each team. As for their last 9, San Francisco have won 6, while Philly has won 5. San Francisco is in a really good spot to potentially make the Stage 4 playoffs, and with good reason. Their new coach is really getting good results out of them, and they are making really smart use of their substitutions and individual player skills. Super is quickly becoming one of my new favourite tanks. Architect is designing chaos for his opponents. Sinatra is just being Sinatra, and Baby Bay is killing it on Hanzo. Let's quickly talk about how insane he was last week on Kings Row. Go back and watch the game against the Fuel. Man, he is hitting arrows like Robin Hood. The dude is just bending the game world to his advantage. He played great both days that they were playing. Fusion, on the other hand, are in a bit of disarray. EQO is out on a wrist injury. Now, when I filmed this, I didn't hear any updates on it, so if he's cleared to play this week, then cool. In the meantime, Shadowburn's return to the starting lineup is basically to keep his seat warm while he's away. Now, I like Shadowburn, he seems like a chill guy, but he's no EQO. You can just see how important EQO is in the Fusion's lineup. I've heard he's very vocal on comms and does a lot of shot calling, and that absence has been noted in their recent games. It's not to say that the team is playing poorly, they're just not as polished as they need to be in this critical time of the competition. Especially against a team like the Shock, who are looking good and are keen to make a name for themselves before the season ends. I also wouldn't mind seeing the Fusion sub out their tanks for Fraggy and Poco on some maps. I feel like Sato and Hotba, while they are good at their job, they aren't as effective on some maps as Fraggy and Poco have been in the past. Kings Row and Oasis are examples that spring to mind. It might freshen the team up with some new ways to play that might help them best their opponents. All that being said, I think San Francisco is looking like a better team this stage. The community still backs Philly 62-38, but I'm backing the Shock 60-40. Unless Carpe absolutely dominates in a sniper battle, I think Philly is going to have a really hard time answering the Shock. And that's it for the video, guys. I'll quickly recap. Fliks picks for day 1 are Boston Uprising, Florida Mayhem, and Houston Outlaws. Fliks picks for day 2 are the LA Valiant, New York Excelsior, and San Francisco Shock. Thanks everyone for watching. Comment below, let me know what you think of my picks and analysis. If you enjoyed the video, a like would be really appreciated. Don't forget to subscribe so you can stay updated when I release the videos. The next one will be covering the second half of week 4, so I hope to see you there.
The Kellex trying to keep Fleta alive, manages to do just that, and the members of Boston falling once again. OT will only last about as long as these tanks do, I think. Kalios does get two with the self-destruct.
This might be it.
They got